Shame is the weapon of cowards who cannot defeat you through merit, so they attempt to defeat you through humiliation. And the moment someone tries to shame you, the moment they attempt to weaponize your perceived flaws or mistakes against you, they've revealed something critical. They believe shame still has power over you. They believe you can be controlled through public humiliation, through the exposure of what you'd rather keep hidden, through the mobilization of social judgment against you. This belief is their fatal miscalculation, because shame only works when you participate in it, when you internalize their judgment, when you accept their framing of who you are and what you should feel bad about. The person who understands the mechanics of shame, who sees it for the social control mechanism it actually is, becomes immune to it. And once you're immune, once their primary weapon bounces off you harmlessly, you can turn the entire dynamic on its head. You can transform their attack into their own destruction, using the very shame they tried to inflict as the instrument of their undoing. This isn't about becoming shameless in the sense of having no standards. It's about becoming strategically immune to shame as a control mechanism while maintaining the ability to deploy it devastatingly against those who attempted to use it against you first. Refuse the premise entirely. The first and most critical move when someone attempts to shame you is to refuse the underlying premise that you should feel ashamed. Shame requires your agreement. It requires you to accept that what they're highlighting is actually shameful, that their judgment is valid, that you should feel diminished by their exposure or accusation. When you refuse this premise, when you simply don't accept that what they're pointing to is cause for shame, the entire attack collapses. They're left holding a weapon that only works if you grab the other end, and you're simply not grabbing it. The psychology of premise refusal involves a fundamental reframing of what's happening. Instead of accepting their frame that you've done something shameful and now must defend yourself, you operate from the frame that they're attempting manipulation through social pressure, and you're simply not participating. This isn't denial of facts. It's refusal to accept their emotional and moral interpretation of those facts. You can acknowledge what happened while completely rejecting that it's something to be ashamed of. Emotionally, this refusal creates a dissonance that destabilizes the attacker. They expect defensiveness, justification, embarrassment, backpedaling. What they encounter instead is calm, non-acceptance of their premise. You're not arguing about whether what they're accusing you of is true. You're simply not accepting that it matters or that it reflects poorly on you. This response is so unexpected that it often short-circuits their entire attack strategy. The power of premise refusal lies in how it reveals the arbitrary nature of shame. Most shame operates on shared social agreement about what's shameful. When you withdraw your agreement, when you refuse to participate in that shared understanding, you expose that shame is constructed rather than inherent. What they're calling shameful, you're calling irrelevant or even reasonable. This forces them to either escalate into making their case for why you should be ashamed, which puts them on the defensive, or retreat from an attack that clearly isn't landing. People attempting to shame you are counting on your internalized shame doing most of their work. They're expecting you to feel embarrassed, to scramble to restore your image, to be wounded by exposure. When none of that happens, when you simply don't feel what they need you to feel, they experience their powerlessness in real time. Their weapon failed. And a failed shaming attempt is worse than no attempt at all because it demonstrates to everyone watching that you're immune to that form of attack. The refusal also forces the shamer into an uncomfortable position where they must either double down on trying to convince you that you should feel shame, which makes them look desperate and controlling, or abandon their attack entirely, which makes them look ineffective. Either path leads to their diminishment rather than yours. They entered the interaction expecting to elevate themselves by lowering you, but premise refusal inverts this dynamic entirely. Turn the shame back on the shamer. Once you've refused the premise, the next move is to reframe the entire interaction so that the shameful behavior isn't what they're accusing you of, but rather their attempt to shame you. This reversal is devastating because it takes the moral high ground they thought they occupied and relocates it under your feet. Suddenly, the shameful act isn't whatever you did. It's their decision to weaponize shame, to attack rather than address, to try manipulation rather than honest engagement. The psychology of this reversal involves making their tactics the issue rather than whatever they were trying to use against you. You shift focus from the content of their accusation to the form of their attack. You highlight that they chose shame as a weapon, that they're attempting to control through humiliation, that they're engaging in a form of social bullying. This reframing is powerful because most people trying to shame others are doing so while maintaining a facade of moral superiority. You strip away that facade and reveal the ugliness of their actual behavior. Emotionally, this reversal triggers intense discomfort in the attacker because you've turned their own weapon against them. They set out to make you feel ashamed, and now they're the ones being called out for shameful behavior. The cognitive dissonance is overwhelming. They must either acknowledge that weaponizing shame is wrong, which invalidates their entire attack, or defend it, which makes them look even worse. Either way, they lose. The execution of this reversal must be calm and factual rather than emotional or defensive. You're not angrily counterattacking. You're simply observing what they're doing and naming it clearly. This clinical naming of their behavior as manipulation, as attempted shaming, as a control tactic is far more devastating than any emotional outburst. It demonstrates that you see the game they're playing and you're not impressed by it. This reversal also creates a powerful demonstration for any audience to the interaction. People watching see someone attempting to shame you and you calmly pointing out that the shameful behavior is the shaming itself. This often triggers recognition in observers that they've been manipulated by similar tactics, that shame is indeed a weapon, and that you're right to refuse it. The person who tried to shame you loses credibility and social standing in direct proportion to how effectively you've revealed their tactics. The beauty of this reversal is that it requires no defense of whatever they were trying to shame you for. You don't need to justify your actions or prove they weren't shameful. You simply redirect attention to the shameful nature of using shame as a weapon. This redirection is almost impossible to counter because defending the use of shame as a tactic is a losing position. Everyone instinctively recognizes that trying to humiliate others is ugly behavior, even if they participate in it themselves. Expose the motivation behind the shaming. The third strategic move is to analyze and expose why the person is attempting to shame you. Shame is rarely deployed randomly. It serves a purpose for the person wielding it, and that purpose is usually deeply unflattering. They're attempting to control you, to elevate themselves by diminishing you, to punish you for threatening their position or ego, to deflect from their own inadequacies. When you expose these motivations, you strip away the moral authority they're claiming and reveal the petty, self-serving reasons they're actually operating from. The psychology of motive exposure involves understanding what the shamer gains from your shame. Are they trying to keep you in a subordinate position? Are they deflecting attention from their own failures? Are they threatened by your success or choices? Are they enforcing conformity to standards that benefit them? Once you identify their actual motivation, you can articulate it clearly, forcing them and anyone watching to confront the real dynamics at play. Emotionally, having your motivations exposed is extraordinarily uncomfortable because it reveals that your high-minded moral stance was actually self-interested manipulation. The person attempting to shame you wants to appear as though they're upholding standards or helping you see your errors. When you reveal they're actually acting from envy, insecurity, desire for control, or deflection, their entire position crumbles. They can't maintain moral authority while being exposed as acting from such base motivations. The articulation of their motivations should be done matter-of-factly, almost sympathetically. You're not attacking them for having these motivations. You're simply observing them and naming them. This calm analysis is more devastating than accusatory anger because it positions you as the one with clarity and insight while they're the one operating from unconscious or hidden agendas. You're the psychologist diagnosing their behavior, not a defendant protesting their accusations. This exposure also educates any observers about how shame operates as a social control mechanism. People watching begin to understand that shame isn't just about right and wrong. It's often about power, about keeping people in their place, about punishing deviation from norms that serve certain interests. This broader understanding inoculates the audience against future manipulation through shame, both protecting them and further delegitimizing the person who tried to use it against you. The precision with which you identify their true motivations is crucial. Vague accusations that they're jealous or insecure can be dismissed, but specific, accurate identification of exactly what they're trying to accomplish through shaming you, what threat you pose to them, what they stand to gain from your diminishment. This specificity makes the exposure undeniable. They recognize that you see them clearly, that you understand the game completely, and that understanding renders their tactics useless. Demonstrate total indifference to their judgment. The fourth strategic element is to make it viscerally clear that you do not value their opinion or judgment, that their disapproval carries no weight with you whatsoever. This isn't something you state defensively. It's something you demonstrate through your demeanor, your responses, and your complete lack of emotional investment in what they think. Shame requires you to care about the shamer's opinion. When you genuinely don't, when this indifference is real and visible, the shame attack becomes impotent. The psychology of demonstrated indifference involves communicating through every aspect of your response that this person's judgment is irrelevant to you. You're not upset by their attack. You're not scrambling to change their mind. You're not worried about what they think. You're simply unmoved because their opinion has no value in your assessment of yourself. This is different from claiming not to care while clearly being bothered. This is genuine indifference that emanates from having secure internal standards that don't require external validation. Emotionally, being shown that your judgment is irrelevant is deeply destabilizing to someone who thought wielding judgment gave them power. They attacked expecting to wound, to influence, to control. Instead, they encounter someone who seems to barely register their attack as significant. This indifference communicates that they don't matter, that their opinion is weightless, that they're essentially non-factors in your life and decision-making. For people whose power comes from judgment and approval, this is annihilating. The demonstration of indifference must be authentic to be effective. You cannot fake this. If you're actually hurt or concerned about their judgment while trying to appear indifferent, it will show through and they'll recognize they've landed a hit. The indifference must flow from genuine internal work, where you've actually divorced your self-worth from external opinion, where you've actually developed the security to not need their or anyone's approval. This indifference also has a peculiar magnetic quality. People are drawn to those who don't need their approval, who don't care about their judgment. While the person attempting to shame you loses status and influence, you often gain it precisely because you've demonstrated immunity to the social pressure that controls most people. Others recognize this strength and are both impressed and attracted by it. The way you communicate indifference matters enormously. It's not through aggressive dismissal or theatrical unconcern. It's through a calm, almost friendly acknowledgement that they've expressed an opinion, coupled with the clear reality that this opinion will have zero impact on your choices or self-perception. You might even thank them for sharing their perspective while making it obvious that their perspective changes nothing for you. Use their attack as proof of your threat to them. The final and perhaps most psychologically sophisticated move is to reframe their shaming attempt as evidence that you're threatening them, that you're doing something right, that you're powerful enough to warrant their attack. This reframing transforms what they intended as your weakness into proof of your strength. Their attack becomes validation rather than condemnation, evidence that you matter enough to threaten rather than evidence that you should be ashamed. The psychology of this reframing involves recognizing that people don't waste energy attacking those who are irrelevant or unthreatening. They attack when they feel threatened, when someone is taking power or position or freedom that they want to prevent. By attempting to shame you, they've revealed that you have something they want to take, that you're doing something they want to stop, that you represent a threat to their position or worldview. This recognition flips the entire meaning of their attack. Emotionally, having your attack reframed as proof that you're threatening is infuriating because it takes your intended message and inverts it completely. You wanted to diminish someone and instead you've elevated them. You wanted to make them feel weak and instead you've provided proof of their strength. This inversion creates a helpless rage because there's no way to attack someone that can't be reframed this way once they understand the dynamic. The articulation of this reframe should be done with a certain amused recognition rather than angry defensiveness. You're genuinely interested in what you're doing that threatens them enough to warrant this attack. You're treating their shame attempt as valuable information about your impact and effectiveness. This curiosity about what you're doing right that prompted their attack is maddening to someone who intended to punish you for doing wrong. This reframing also provides a powerful lesson for anyone observing the interaction. They see that attacks often reveal more about the attacker's fears and insecurities than about the target's flaws. They learn to read shaming attempts as information about power dynamics rather than as valid moral judgments. This education undermines the effectiveness of shame as a social control tool generally, protecting the broader community from manipulation. The reframe also allows you to express gratitude for the attack, which is perhaps the most destabilizing response possible. You can thank them for confirming that you're making an impact, for showing you that your choices or actions are significant enough to warrant opposition, for providing evidence that you're on the right track. This gratitude is sincere because their attack truly does provide valuable information about what threatens the status quo. The ultimate destruction of someone who attempts to shame you comes not from counterattacking them directly, but from systematically dismantling the power of shame itself as a weapon. When you refuse the premise, reverse the shame, expose motivations, demonstrate indifference, and reframe their attack as validation, you don't just defend yourself from this particular shame attempt. You render yourself permanently immune to shame as a control mechanism. The person who tried to shame you is left having accomplished nothing except demonstrating their own powerlessness and revealing their own insecurities. They attacked, and not only did they fail to wound you, they wounded themselves. Their weapon backfired, and everyone watching learned that shame only works on those who accept it, that you don't accept it, and that attempting to shame you is therefore a losing strategy. This lesson spreads. Others stop trying. And you've transformed from potential victim of shame into someone who destroys the weapon of shame itself simply by refusing to be controlled by it. The shamer becomes a cautionary tale about what happens when you try to diminish someone who has transcended the need for your approval, who sees your tactics clearly, and who turns your weapons into proof of their own strength.